Tea-dum, tea-doo, a teedly-dumpty-doo. Tea-dum, tea-doo, a teedly-dumpty-doo. We're following the leader, the leader, the leader, following the leader wherever he may go. Whack! That exact moment, I turned my head into a free-falling mass of blonde hair. In her excitement over reading Peter Pan, my 2-year-old had flung herself back and collided squarely with my nose. By what sounded like gunshots reverberating in my brain, I knew it was broken. On cue, the blood started to come, and I had enough sense to pop up and run over into the hallway where there were hardwood floors. Less messy that way, and I'm a neat freak. The last thing that I wanted was to soil her white bedding, but even more so, for her to actually see the blood. She'd already seen so much in her young life. Just earlier that evening, in fact, when I'd given her a shot in her little toddler leg. Afterwards, she'd picked out a pink Barbie Band-Aid. We'd been through a lot of Band-Aids that year. But let me go back to the beginning, when life seemed to be going down a much simpler path. My daughter, Merritt Liv Peterson, was born on July 15th, 2004. Her name means lady, full of life. And never could I have imagined just how poetic her name would come to be. When Merritt was 3 months old, I noticed a small pink bump on her right ring finger. Nothing to be alarmed of, really, but full of a new mother's concern, I brought it to the attention of her pediatrician, who assured me it was nothing. Yet, it continued to grow, and with that, so did my concern. I took her to see more specialists, dermatologists even, and all of whom told me it was nothing. By the time she was 18 months old, the bump had more than doubled in size, and it had started to look like a melanoma lesion that my dad, Merritt Stoppe, had removed from his forearm a few years prior. I told myself, Candy, come on, you are being ridiculous. He is a grown man. He's been in the sun his whole life. She's just a child. That's crazy. Ultimately, my mother's intuition overpowered my internal dialogue, and I marched into that last physician's office demanding that they remove this bump. And I distinctly remember him telling me in a very patronizing manner, "Now, Mom, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And since she's a girl and you want her to look pretty," and he used air quotes, "we'll have it removed." Now, let me tell you, I had some choice words for him that rhymed with duck. But I managed to bite my tongue and schedule the first appointment available. I'd learned early in life that you can catch a lot more flies with honey than you do vinegar. After 2 rescheduled appointments, Merritt's case was not a priority after all. She went in for what Dr. Duck told us would be a 15-minute procedure. It was 2 hours. And although Merritt made it through that surgery without incident, there was no denying that the demeanor of this physician had completely changed. She was discharged, and we were told that we would have her pathology reports back in 2 weeks' time. That 2 weeks turned into 4. And what had begun as a very simple path turned into a far more circuitous one. That initial pathology returned inconclusive. It was sent back to 2 other leading dermatological pathologists, and those 2 came back inconclusive. After weeks of agonizing wait, Dr. Duck called and referred us to MD Anderson Cancer Center. I'm sorry. What did you say? Cancer Center? With heavy hearts, we packed up our young family and drove to Houston, where Merritt's case was dealt with immediately. She had a wider excision of the original site and a sentinel node biopsy. And on July 3rd, 2006, we received a call and the news that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Your daughter has cancer, melanoma. It has spread and it is life-threatening. She will need immediate further surgery and a year-long worth of treatments. Although we expect her to respond favorably to treatments because of her young age, we must tell you that for an adult with this diagnosis, the prognosis is dim. On the eve of her second birthday, Merritt had her neck surgery. It was long and complex. Yet when she woke up, she did so with a smile. Right next to, uh-oh, Elmo's too big. She called him that because clearly that Elmo was far too big to be in the hospital bed with her. Completely undeterred by the drainage tubes hanging from her small body, she said please and thank you to every nurse and doctor that poked and prodded her. She alone set the tone for how we would navigate this path with the focus on joy and on living. Shortly thereafter, Merritt had her port surgically implanted for her induction phase of her treatments. Later that afternoon, she would have her first dose of interferon, and that night, she spiked 105 fever. We were up all night long tending to her. And at 5 a.m., my husband, Jeff, drove me to the hospital so we could deliver my son, Hale. I remember holding on to my pregnant belly as they rolled me into the OR, wondering if my sweet son would ever truly get the chance to know his big sister. That next year was a complete blur. The first 3 months of my maternity leave were spent in the infusion room. The next year spent back at work, nursing my new child and my daughter back to health. It was incredibly taxing. But by the grace of God and the skilled hands of Merritt's physicians, she successfully completed her year-long of interferon treatments and was declared cancer-free. With this miracle, a new path was revealed. We were so overwhelmed with thanks, we just couldn't press reset. So instead, I asked Merritt's doctor, what could we do to help? The answer he gave me was $500,000. That was not the answer that I was looking for, but all kidding aside, there were over 2,000 samples of DNA from melanoma patients that were just sitting in a lab awaiting genetic testing. Genetic. Genetic. That was a key word. Believing that Merritt's melanoma was caused by genetics, I was sold. And apparently, I'm a sucker because I agreed on the spot to raising that money. We initially started with friends and family, and although everyone was tremendously generous, we learned very quickly that we were going to need to find another way to raise that $500,000. And so I asked my dad, Merritt Stoppe, the same one that had melanoma, who apparently is also a sucker, at least for his daughter and granddaughter anyway, if he would help me run a golf fundraiser. He was a golfer, my mom in the golf business. I figured we could make it work. He said to me, Candy, do you have any clue how much work it is to run a golf fundraiser? And my response was no, but why does that matter? Well, apparently it matters a lot, and in retrospect, if I had known then what I know now, I totally would have run the opposite direction. It's a lot of work. But alas, we started the Merritt Peterson Fund for Melanoma Research. and we started to plan our first golf fundraiser. But we did so under one condition, and that was every single cent that we raised was going to go directly to melanoma research. And the doctor who saved Merritt's life, Dr. Lee, would be responsible for that research, and he would have to come back the next year and tell us exactly what he had done with that money. Which is why, since that very first year, our family has completely underwritten the event, allowing that to happen. Well, apparently MD Anderson didn't have any clue what we were capable of, because that first year we raised over $120,000, $80,000 of it in cash on the day of the event. My sweet rep from MD Anderson quite literally strapped $80K in cold hard cash on her body and boarded a plane back to Houston. She said she felt like a drug lord. Now back to that broken nose. Merritt had completed her year-long worth of treatment, and things were starting to settle into some semblance of normal. Everything except for my nose, that is, which had settled with a nice-sized bump on it. And that wasn't all. After nursing 2 kids, my breasts had also settled. I referred to them as 2 fried eggs hanging from nails. Not pretty. Having put off the repair of my nose, it felt like it was finally the time that I could do it, and just being the practical person that I was, I thought I would have my breast done at the same time. The doctor that would perform my surgery ordered a baseline mammogram. I was only 33, so 7 years away from actually needing one. I was called back for a small biopsy, and on July 12th, the year to the exact date that Merritt had completed her treatments, I got the call from my doctor telling me that I had breast cancer, that we had caught lightning in a bottle. And that had Merritt not broken my nose, I probably wouldn't have had that surgery. And for the 7 years, that cancer would have gone undetected, and it probably would have taken my life. Coincidentally, though I think probably not so, Merritt was home that day from school. I walked over and sat down next to her, and I said, "Merritt, you know how you had cancer and you had to have surgery on your hand? Well, Mommy has cancer too, and I have to have my boobies removed." She looked up at me with these doe eyes, and she goes, "Oh, Mommy, we match." What an amazingly beautiful thing. We did match. Mothers and daughters have a tremendous bond. I'm biased and think that ours is greater than most. Together, we walk this path as survivors, and together we're raising funds necessary to help countless others. Today, the Merritt Peterson Fund is the single largest and highest quality melanoma research study of its kind in the world. Thank you. We've sent over $1 million to research, and that millions of dollars has been leveraged into tens of millions of dollars. The Merritt Peterson Fund is a core contributor to the Melanoma Moonshot program with the bold goal to improve survival rates of those dealing with melanoma. And just this past Tuesday, we held our 9th annual golf fundraiser. This is my beautiful daughter, Merritt. Today, she's a 11-year-old and a fierce melanoma advocate. And I'm proud to say that together, we raised over $100,000 again that will be sent directly to melanoma research. Life presents many paths, some of which you choose, and some of which, quite frankly, you wish you'd never stumbled upon. But when life presented us with that ugly path, we chose to follow it. So I ask you, when the unexpected strikes and presents a path in your life, what will you do? I hope you'll follow it. Tea-dum, tea-doo, a tea-dilly-dum, tea-doo. Thank you.